right, so welcome everyone. Um, this is the April webinar hosted by the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. Our topic today is controlling wild parsnip, and we're joined by our guest presenter, Charlton Rodriguez. He's with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, finishing up his master's work, and he's working with the Renz Weed Science Lab. Um, and he'll tell you a little bit more about himself. Um, but first, I want to tell you just a little bit more about the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. We've been around since 2006. We're here to coordinate among agencies and organizations across our region. We do a lot of work making sure people are aware of early detection species to try and really get at prevention and early detection. And we do a lot of work trying to connect people to best management resources. And that's our topic today. And overall, our mission is just to reduce the impacts of invasive plants in the Midwest. And we do that in part by having organizations sponsor our work. We have 3 sponsors who have joined us for 2025. We have the Invasive Species Center of Ontario, for Control Vegetation Management out of Wisconsin, and we also have Corteva Agriscience, who's actually sponsoring our webinar today, so we really appreciate that. You can learn more about their work at corteva.us. So thank you for them. If you want to learn more about the Midwest Invasive Plant Network or want to connect to additional resources for your invasive plant management, we do maintain a list of invasive plants across our entire region, which you can see on this map here. We cover 9 states as well as the province of Ontario. And we keep track of all the plants that are either listed or regulated across this region. And that list was recently updated within the last year, so very current. We maintain an invasive species control database, so if you're looking for more information on both mechanical and chemical control options, that's a good resource to be aware of. We maintain the woody invasives of the Great Lakes Collaborative website. So if woody invasives are what you're interested in, we have a great deal of information about 28 regulated woody invasives across the Great Lakes area. And then finally, if you work for a cooperative invasive species management area or SISMA, or CWMA. We have resources for you. And if you're looking, excuse me, looking for a SISMA to help you with your invasive species work, you can also find the most, whoever the contact is that's closest to you through our SISMA directory. So again, all this and more at mipn.org. And since we're talking about herbicide management today, I also want to highlight that we do have these new herbicide cards. This is geared a little more towards woody management, of course, but I just want to make sure that you know these are available. We have these nice postcard information sheets on cut stump herbicide application, basal bark, and hack and squirt, as well as some information on integrated pest management. And these are available mipn.org/publications through the Morton Arboretum store. And if you want to stay in touch with MIPN and make sure that you know about upcoming webinars and other activities that we're involved in, we have a quarterly newsletter and email listserv, both of which you can sign up for on our homepage. We try to be pretty active on social media, so you can find us in a variety of places. Our social media, our YouTube page, excuse me, is where you will this video will be posted. And then you can always just email us. We're happy to chat with you about anything invasives. And we are pleased to be able to offer these webinars free of charge, but we do appreciate your support to make sure we can continue doing these. So the QR code next to our MIPN logo there is you can just do a direct donation of any amount, support us at any time. If you want a little more fun way to support our work, we have new MIPN merch. And we actually, if you place an order today, you'll be able to get your shirt in time to wear out for that spring invasive managements that I know you're all planning to do. All right, well, that's enough for me. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and I will drop links in the chat with more information. But let's get Charlton up and have his screen shared so we can hear about wild parsnip, which is what you're all here for today.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so today I'm going to be just talking about controlling parsnip and prairies using SiteVue. So just a little bit about me. I did my undergraduate at Cal State University San Marcos, where I Got my degree in biology and ecology. So while I was studying there as an undergrad, I got to work with a professor called Dr. Velitis, and I studied black mustard, which is an invasive species in California. And now I study wild parsnip under Dr. Renz because I really enjoyed learning about different types of invasives. They were always just very interesting to me, like why are they here? How are they growing so well? So I'm just going to kind of continue my love of invasive species through that and through Dr. Renz. He graciously accepted me into his lab. And I will actually be finishing my master's degree in environment and resources at UW. I'll be graduating this spring. And then I plan to go eventually for my PhD to teach. All right. So, as you were kind of all wondering, why are you here? Why should you really care about wild parsnip? So, wild parsnip is an invasive plant in the US, and it's actually restricted here in Wisconsin. Plant the parsnip plant can cause the skin to turn red and blister when the sap meets human skin. These are more mild versions of it. It can even cause boils. So all of that sap has to do is get on you, and then if it comes into contact with sunlight, then it starts to burn the skin. So not a nice feeling. But it also can compete with native forbs and reduce diversity that has been seen by other researchers. I've noticed native forbs might be a little bit more technical term, but essentially what a forb is, it is an herbaceous flowering plant that is not a grass, sedge, or shrub. Or sorry, not shrub. Grass, sedge, or rush. So if I mention forbs, just think herbaceous plant that is not a grass, sedge, or rush. So the wild parsnip is actually distributed well throughout the Midwest, as you can see right here, and a little bit in Canada, as you can see right around here, and also in parts of the Northeast. But we say that its distribution in Wisconsin is more of kind of like ground zero for wild parsnip. We have over 22,000 observations just in Wisconsin alone. And we have a lot of areas that are just very susceptible to invasion. So I'm going to go over a couple different areas. So these percentages are just the percentage of that type of area to be susceptible or to have wild parsnip in it. So urban and developed areas has about 80% susceptibility to invasion. Agricultural fields have 75%, shrublands have 53, and then grasslands have up to 76%. And I'll be mostly focusing in grasslands for my presentation. But you might be wondering just these are the general areas, but where can parsnip actually invade? It can invade in different roadsides. So this is actually one of the sites that I've been doing my research where we did our kind of preliminary experiments. It can invade in grasslands. This is CRP field. As you can see, everything yellow right here, that's actually wild parsnip. We also, it can invade uh, riparian floodplains. So here you can see that wild parsnip in the back. This area was actually treated with a different herbicide, so to remove the wild parsnip. And here we have a prairie restoration. Again, another one of my focuses for my experiments. All right, so if you're not familiar with wild parsnip, I'm just going to go over just a couple of key features that you can use to identify it. The first one is the leaves. They're alternate and pinnately compound, and they kind of wrap around the the stem of the leaf. And as you can see right here, they're also serrated, so they kind of look sharp, and that's how you can kind of tell if it's a parsnip plant. The stems have grooves on them, as you can see right here. So they're pretty distinct from most other plants. So little grooves within the stem. And then the flowers form yellow umbels. So you can think about it as like a little bowl shape with flowers all along the top. So little umbels right here. So they form like little sections of umbels. So that's just a very brief overview of just kind of like generally what they look like. We actually have a lot more resources at the Renz Wheat Science website. So here it goes much more in depth on the stems and the leaves. It even goes over the fruits and the flowers, and it even gives you a couple of lookalikes of species that kind of look like wild parsnip, and people kind of confuse them for each other. So here's the Renz Wheat Science cals.wis.edu website. Michelle will put in a link if you want to use it. Um, Focus specifically on the invasive plant ID slide. So if you click this, well, sorry, if you click the invasive ID, this slide will pop up and you'll go to invasive plant ID. And we have over 100 different species of invasive plant ID slides. So all you have to do is search the species that you're wanting to look for, and then you can go in and look up the species. And it'll give you a whole little PowerPoint on how to identify it and things like that. All right, so that was just more of an intro. Now I'm going to get into more of the bulk of the presentation today. This is just a general outline of what I'll be going over. So I'll be going over some control options and how that some of these control options of like what we know that works on wild parsnip and how that might not be feasible for a prairie setting. I'll go over SiteVue briefly, or I'll go over SiteVue, and then I'll talk about kind of how it works, what it's used for, things like that. I'll go over my research results. So I'll share with the research that I've done with SiteVue and kind of give you uh, how it works in prairie settings and in roadsides. And then I'll go over my survey. Uh, I would ask you to take a survey at the end of this because we really want to know how you, given this information, how would you use SiteVue? All right. So here are some general chemical control options that work. So there are several broadleaf herbicides that are very effective on wild parsnip. We recommend that you spray in the spring and in early May, particularly when the rosettes are present. So you can kind of get the 2 years of control. I'll go over what the 2 years of control is, but spraying in early May or even in fall will help to control wild parsnip. Some other chemical control options, hand weeding is always available. It's the safest to do in the rosette stage without this giant stalk and it carries a lot of sap. So cutting off the root to prevent new growth, that's the safest method to remove wild parsnip and ensure that it doesn't grow again. Here we have an example of a tool called the Parsnip Predator. It's just a specialized shovel that allows you to get very deep and then to cut off the root of the wild parsnip so it doesn't regrow. And then mowing can take about 3 to 4 years to kind of see some progress, but we do see progress when mowing is done. You want to do it after the secondary umbels. So these are the primary umbels, and these are usually the first to appear. Then it'll start producing its secondary umbels, trying to produce, the most amount of seeds it can. So you want to also do it after the secondary umbels form and then before fruiting. So that's when it exhausts all its energy, but it's not ready to produce new wild parsnip. So doing it after secondary umbels, but before fruiting. So as you can, or as you may have, oh, sorry, as you may have already seen, there could be some potential problems with control options in prairies. So most herbicides are not very selected, and you risk damaging a lot of desirable forbs. As you can see on the left here, these plants have been scorched by an herbicide, and they're very damaged and most likely not going to recover. Mowing optional or is an option in prairies, but it can take many years to see an effect if you're trying to remove invasives. And it still risks damaging a lot of desirable forbs because similar to herbicides, it's not selective. If you're mowing through. Hand weeding is a bit more selective, but it's very labor intensive. It's not feasible in very large infestations. If you have many acres that you're kind of managing, it's not feasible to kind of send the workers out in there and kind of pull all the parsnip and get all of it. And you're going to have to do that for multiple years as well. And it's also just very dangerous because it has the sap and it can burn and it can, cause problems. All right, so SiteVue might potentially be a good fit for prairies because Corteva has claimed that it's a selective to specific broadleaf plants. That's mainly plants in the carrot family or Acacia, if you're familiar with that term. Um, so plants in these families, there are a lot of invaders, at least within Wisconsin, that are already in this family. So I think of, wild parsnip as one of them, and wild carrot. So, but we really want to know, are the natives forbs tolerant? So in a previous study, we have kind of seen, this is just a study that tested a bunch of different herbicides against each other and kind of seeing which forbs have the most tolerant to each one of them. And this is a year after treatment. So as you can see, transline uh, removed a lot of the native forbs in the area, while SiteVue removed very little to almost no of the native forbs. So we're kind of seeing this trend that it is selective, but we don't know exactly at what length. And I'll be talking about that in the second part. But just a general overview of SiteVue, it's fluoroperoxabenzoyl is the main ingredient. Uh, Corteva calls it Renz core, or kind of like their trade name for it. It's an auxin herbicide, group 4, and it causes uncontrolled growth in the plants that it infects. So it has relatively low toxicity to wildlife. The EPA actually considers it very safe to honeybees, birds, and mammals, and it's actually received a few different awards for environmental safety. So some of its properties, it has limited persistence in the soil and in the aquatic areas. So the soil half-life is only 3 to 34 days, while the aquatic half-life is really low in 4 to 6 days. It has limited movement in the environment, so it doesn't move in the soil, so uh, you don't have a lot of risk of it getting into like water tables and things like that. And it has very low water solubility. And also has really low potential violation, volatilization, so you don't have to worry about using it in hot conditions.
Hello, everyone. This is Mark Renz, and I thought I would give Charlton a break in explaining fluoroperoxafen and its history and current use rates in the U.S. because it is quite complicated, as you'll find out in these next slides. Well, first off, this active ingredient was first registered in rice as the trade name Loyant, and then something unique really happened in 2018 is this product was registered in aquatic areas for broadleaf weed control in floating and submerged aquatic plants, which is quite unique for an active ingredient. It then was registered in 2020 where Corteva tank mixed it with aminopyrrolide to provide really good broadleaf control in pastures and natural terrestrial areas, and this is widely used in both those settings currently. Then in 2021 is where SiteVue VM was first released. And this is really where it gets quite tricky because for some reason, Corteva decided to only make this available when sold in bulk, so tens upon tens of gallons that are sold in these mini bulks, and it needed to be blended with other active ingredients. So because of these restrictions, it really limited to the areas in where SiteVue was actively sold to just a few. They continue to register this active ingredient in new areas. It was registered for use in orchard floors for broadleaf weed management in 2024. And another product was just released for pastures where they mixed fluoroperoxafen with 2,4-D in a product called Nova Graze. So in part due to the work of Charlton and others, this product is going to be re-released again under the trade name just SiteVue. It's going to have just be fluoroperoxafen, but the big difference is it's going to be available exclusively as that active ingredient and only sold in 2.5 gallon jugs. So it will be available for land managers sometime this summer. We're not sure exactly when.
All right. That was a recording of Dr. Renz. Unfortunately, he couldn't speak today, but was able to record. So what I'm going to be going over now is kind of like what my experiments kind of entail. So we use specifically SiteVue VM. So the label on SiteVue VM recommends anywhere between 5 and 21 flow ounces. But actually, wild parsnip is not on the label for SiteVue VM. Wild carrot is, and it says anywhere between 5 and 10 flow ounces. So, knowing this, we kind of developed two research questions to look into uh, SiteVue. So, what is the lowest rate that controls parsnip? That's more of getting more bang for your buck. What is actually the lowest rate you can use, and you can minimize maybe the amount of damage to native forbs? And then will SiteVue harm native forbs if it's broadcasted? Because while we have seen that it is tolerant to native forbs, but at what rate? What are we looking at? Will it behave differently in mixtures? So these are kind of the two main driving research questions that have driven my research. All right, so for the first experiment, what rate is effective? We are evaluating the effectiveness of SiteVue within small plot research. So we got a bunch of small plots. We tested a bunch of different treatments in each one of them and kind of saw how each of the treatments affected the plot and the parsnip within the plot. So we chose a heavily infested roadside. We applied it in rosette to the rosettes and springs after the seedling has emerged, so we can grab those as well. So in Wisconsin, this is about early May. So we did two separate trials to test this, and you'll see why as I explain later. We did 14 different treatments between 2 and 16 flow ounces. I'll go into what each one was. And then in a 2024 trial that was done last year, we did 9 treatments ranging from 0.5 to 16 flow ounces. All right, so as you can see right here, I'll go over the graph. This is wild parsnip density 2 months after treatment. So here we have wild parsnip density per meter squared, and then we have each of the rates of SiteVue that we use. So SiteVue 2 is 2 flow ounces, SiteVue 4 is 4 flow ounces. And then the NTC is just the non-treated control. So that just means we didn't spray anything in that area and would simulate regular conditions. So as you can see right here, statistically, we did not see any difference between any of the treatments. And overall, we almost eliminated SiteVue from this roadside. And as you can see visually, here's the non-treated control on the right, and here is 4 flow ounces on the left. As you can see, there's a lot of wild parsnip in this area, and here you see relatively none to very little. Seeing as how the lowest rate provided so much control, we were kind of thinking, well, can we try an even lower rate the following year? So here we tried a 0.5 flow ounces per acre, and then we did these 5 treatments that we did in the previous year to kind of just see again, are we seeing the same trends? Is this just a fluke, or are we actually seeing a trend? So here, again, wild parsnip density 2 months after treatment, wild parsnip per meter squared on the left or on the y-axis, and then the different treatments. Here, we're seeing, again, a very similar trend. Even the lowest rate of SiteVue compared to 16 flow ounces is showing the exact same control statistically. There's, again, a little bit of variability, but statistically, it wasn't any different. And here you can see one of our higher rates compared with maybe one of our lower rates and maybe or in a mid rate. As you can see, there's no parsnip present. Everything was removed. And then we decided to come back after 1 year on the 2023 experiment. We still haven't been able to come back for the 2024 because we're waiting until the summer. But for the first experiment, wild parsnip per meter squared, again, on the y-axis, different rates on the bottom. We're seeing a little bit of variability before with the 4 and 6 flow ounces. As you can see, 4 is slightly higher than the rest. Statistically, there wasn't any difference, but we're still kind of seeing trends that maybe a higher rate will be needed for more control. And the reason we are seeing control in the second year is because we're getting the two years of control from one spray. So we spray in early spring when we're spraying all the wild parsnip in the rosette stage. We're also spraying the seedlings that are beneath all the other wild parsnip and other plants because we're broadcast spraying these plots. And with that, we're hitting a lot of the seedlings, effectively controlling those in that year, and they will die or they won't be able to flower in the second year and produce more seeds. So that's what I meant before about getting 2 years of control. All right, so just a summary of that experiment. Low rates of SiteVue are effective in controlling wild parsnip. 99% of wild parsnip was controlled, and application should be applied in either spring or fall. As you can see right here, we still have some parsnip present, but here it's very distorted because of how the auxin herbicide works. Very distorted. It's not going to flower. It's not going to produce fruits, so it's not a viable plant. But it's still in the field, but it's not going to produce any seeds. And so our research suggests that anything less than 1 flow ounce of SiteVue will control parsnip 2 months after treatment. And then if you want to get more control or have that 1 year control, we recommend around 6 flow ounces will be needed because that's just what we've seen basic trends. While it wasn't statistically significant, that's just what we're seeing with some trends. All right, So now we get to the practicality of the matter. So we've seen that it works, but this is a roadside. There's not a lot of native forbs. There's not a lot of essentially things that can be harmed by SiteVue. So we wanted to be able to test it in an actual prairie where there's native forb presence and there's more of like a risk associated with spraying SiteVue because we risk damaging some of the native forbs. So here I have on the y-axis, this is native forb cover. So this is just a visual estimate of how much cover of native forbs that we see. This is 1 year after treatment, and these are the different sites where we looked at. So in black is the non-treated control. So again, would simulate regular conditions. And in red is SiteVue VM at 15 flow ounces. So a little bit of a higher rate than what we tested. So this was other research. Was actually done by one of the undergrads in the lab. So they went to 3 different sites. They sprayed their 2 treatment, or they sprayed the treatment, and they kind of see what forbs were still present. And in Verona and Barneveld, we see that there is an increase in native forbs. While not statistically significant, we see that there is an increase, but PDS, we don't see an increase in native forbs. So we're getting a little bit of variability between sites. I'll get more into that later. All right. For the site that I'm looking at for native forbs, or kind of testing SiteVue within native forbs, we're looking at a prairie with native grasses and forbs, just east of Minneapolis, if you know where Minneapolis is. 70%, it had about 70% native forb cover at the time of treatment. So we had black-eyed Susan, cup plant, golden Alexander, yellow coneflower, and then bergamot. Wild parsnip was present in the prairie, approximately 17% of the cover, and this study was done in 2023. So pretty large amount of the prairie is filled with parsnip. Our methods are very similar to the first experiment. So it's a similar small plot design. So we have small plots, that area is sprayed, and then we calculate the amount of native forbs and parsnip in the area. This one was actually sprayed at a later date because, as you may have known, or some of you from Wisconsin, you know we had a drought in Wisconsin in around the summertime. So we couldn't spray in May because a lot of the plants were stressed. And if we did spray, we wouldn't know if SiteVue was affecting the plants or it was just the drought. So we waited until more rain events, and then we sprayed in about June, late June. So a little bit later than what we would usually spray, but still we were able to spray. And this is 3 treatments. And so we did a non-treated control, again, stimulating normal conditions. We tested SiteVue at 8 flow ounces, and then SiteVue at 6 flow ounces plus 2 flow ounces at plateau. Because SiteVue has been known to been used in mixtures, so you want to be able to test, does a mixture actually provide more control or more forb tolerance? All right, so first we want to see if just we were able to control wild parsnip. So this is wild parsnip 1 month after treatment. So again, wild parsnip plants per meter squared. The non-treated control is in black. SiteVue at 8 flow ounces is in red, and then the yellowish tan is SiteVue at 6 flow ounces and plateau at 2. So as you can see, we reduced wild parsnip very heavily. Statistically, the 2 treatments were not different from each other, but as you can kind of see, SiteVue 6, well, the mixture, I'll just call it the mixture for now. So the mixture removed more wild parsnip than the 8 flow ounces, but statistically, very similar result. And we kind of see that continue into the second year. You actually see, if you can see the comparison, it's about 1.2 plants. Here it's closer to 1.8, so we have a big explosion of parsnip, but here we're still seeing it very well controlled. More of a bigger difference between the mixture and then SiteVue 8, but statistically very similar as we are eliminating wild parsnip. So now that we know that wild parsnip is being eliminated, SiteVue is working on it in prairie settings, we decided to look at some of the native forbs in the area. So this is just the average stem density as a percentage. So just the percentage of native forbs within the area. So again, similar non-treated control, SiteVue 8, and then the mixture. So SiteVue 8 actually reduced a fair amount, about 24% of the average stem density within the prairie. The mixture also reduced it as well, but not as much. It was more about, I would say maybe around 15%. But statistically, it was not different from the non-treated control. But SiteVue at 8 flow ounces was different from the non-treated control. So we're kind of seeing these trends. SiteVue is affecting native forbs, but we wanted to look at what actually forbs it is affecting. So three different species were actually hit by the parsnip, or sorry, hit by SiteVue harder than others. So we have golden Alexanders, and then we have weedy goldenrod species. So that's just a couple of different species that we just fit into like undesirable goldenrods, like Canada goldenrod and things like that. We also have yellow coneflower here. So these were the species that actually showed that they were reduced by SiteVue, as well as the mixture. The other species did not show any reduction in total native forb density, or native forb cover, sorry. So we see that we're losing some native forbs, but we also wanted to see how the overall prairie is being is being impacted. So a metric to kind of assess the quality of prairies, relatively new, I would say, is the coefficient of conservation, or COC. It's useful for conservation and restoration because it's much more informative than just saying that you have a lot of species richness, because you may have a lot of different types of species in a field, but it could be that they're not contributing as much as some other species, and you have relatively low of those species. So what it does is it uses a rating system between 1 and 10. So a 1 would be a very weedy species, which would be something similar to like cleavers, which is a 2, which is not very desirable, and it's not really uh, or contributing a lot to the prairie. 10 would be more rare species in terms of conservation, like they're very active in the prairie and they're very desirable for the prairie. Uh, the closest species, or the highest species we had, was golden Alexanders, which was a 7. All right, so here we have the mean weighted COC. Essentially, how we get the COC is we take all the plants in the field, both the native, non-native, and the grasses, for the native and non-native grasses, and then we calculate their COC, and then we divide it by all the plants within the field, and that kind of gives us an estimate of the COC and how the overall health of the prairie is doing. Here we can see there's no statistical difference between SiteVue 8 and then the mixture, but the mixture is showing to do a little bit better than SiteVue at 8 flow ounces, but still not up to the level of the non-treated control. So we're overall lowering the amount of kind of diversity and health of the prairie. And we believe this to be because of golden Alexander. Since it's such a desirable species, it has a very high value, the highest one, at least within this prairie, and it's being impacted fairly heavily. We believe that is driving down the COC. All right, so just a summary kind of from that experiment. We saw an 83% to 90% reduction in wild parsnip plants, and plateau can allow for a reduced rate of SiteVue to be used. So we've seen that it is effective controlling it even in a mixture. SiteVue does impact or have an impact on total native forbs. So at 8 flow ounce, it reduced it to about 24% of what was the non-treated control or under or natural conditions. And reduced rates could possibly minimize this. So we tried 8 flow ounces, but we didn't try some of uh, the other rates that we tried with the previous experiment. And then native spore species respond differently to SiteVue. As we've seen, golden Alexander, weedy goldenrod species, and then yellow coneflower all lost a lot of species, or lost a lot of density, while species that were not affected were like black-eyed Susan, cleavers, and cup plant. So we see a little bit of variability within the species that are being affected. So before you actually use SiteVue, I just want to give you some things to consider. As we've seen, SiteVue can harm native forbs. So understanding the selectivity of SiteVue to forb species in your field is very important. If you have these sensitive species, uh, you should consider using lower rates or spot spraying to kind of minimize the impact that SiteVue has. And then native forbs did not increase when wild parsnip was controlled. So it kind of begs the question, is wild parsnip truly competing with native forbs? And so we're still currently evaluating this. We only have it at one site and at one location, so we can't say too much on how wild parsnip is impacting prairies. All right, with that, I've given you decent amount of inspiration, I would say, uh, on maybe some of the benefits and the drawbacks of using SiteVue. And we're really just interested in how you will use this information. This is actually part of my defense. I want to know how you, a land manager, person with experience working with either invasives or just in a prairie setting, how would you use this information? Would you use SiteVue? Would you not? Under what conditions? So the content of the survey kind of goes over prairie management, like how you manage your prairies, how much prairies or how much are you managing, how many acres, things like that. How will you manage parsnip in your prairies? Even if you don't have it, we still want your opinion. Like, how would you manage it? How would you use SiteVue in a prairie setting? So would you use it at all, or would you not use it at all? Even if you wouldn't use it at all, I still would invite you to come and join the survey. And then kind of we want to know your tolerance to injury on native forbs from SiteVue. So how much injury do you actually tolerate? Because it might uh, for different people, it might be impacting your prairies more than other species. So would you maybe allow a little bit more injury than, say, somebody who's not really seeing as much of an impact from them? So it's take less than 10 minutes to complete. Dr. Renz swears he can finish it in 5, so it shouldn't take too long to fill out. And then Michelle will drop a link in for the survey. Just some general thank yous and acknowledgments I wanted to say. I want to thank the St. Croix Wetland Management District, specifically Chris Chosen, Tracy Roger, and Alex Boutillier. I also want to thank the Fish and Wildlife summer helpers that helped out gathering this data. And then for control for spraying, Lee Chambeau, specifically him for spraying it from that company. And then I would like to thank the Renz Lab as well, of the students and staff that helped, Dr. Renz for giving me this opportunity, and then Travis Wilson specifically for starting the experiment and getting it off the ground. All right, thank you. And I will take any questions you have.
All right. Thanks, Charlton.
Of course.
There's been a lot of questions, which is great. So I think there's a lot of interest in this topic. Dr. Renz has answered many of them, so but I think we're going to work maybe current and then work back.
Okay.
There was a question here about how the negative effect on native forbs using SiteVue at a rate of 8 fluid ounces compares to something like transline.
So I don't know what the specific like one measure of transline, but as I can go back into here. So this was just a separate experiment that was done in the Renz lab, but as we can see when comparing it with SiteVue, go all the way over here. Transline is not as selective, it seems, compared to SiteVue. As you can see, a lot of native forbs. So you would imagine this is completely filled with native forbs, and here you're seeing a lot of on Transline, you're seeing a lot of removal of the native forbs, while SiteVue, you're not seeing as much removal, at least compared with that specific trial. But as I just said, we kind of don't really know its selectivity to forbs. We're still researching that and kind of seeing what forbs are susceptible and if there is any that are kind of more impacted.
And do you want to weigh in on any other invasive plants that you think this herbicide might also be able to be used for?
So it can
Hello,
be
everyone.
used, oh, sorry about that. Can be used for wild carrot, because that is a member of the Apiaceae family. And then anything within that family should be relatively, SiteVue should be relatively effective on that.
Oh, that wasn't that wasn't Mark chiming in. That was just from the video, wasn't it?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, I was waiting. All right, so I'm going to go back up a little bit. There was a question about because you mentioned spot spraying if there are sensitive
Yes.
plants in the area. Do you have a concentration that you recommend for spot spraying?
So we haven't tested, we just know that spot spraying can kind of lower the amount compared to broadcast spraying. We don't have a recommended kind of, what is it, rate for spot spraying or dosage.
Okay,
I
and then
think
we
Dr.
had
Ren might have
oh,
an idea of possibly what you can use, but we haven't tested it yet. At least I haven't.
Yeah, if I can, thanks, Charlton. If I can chime in. So we have not, Charlton's absolutely right. We have not tested that spot treatment rate. And a lot of companies now, and my guess is they're going to put it in the label, some verbiage that really, because a spot spraying, depending how you apply, you can have a very different volume that's released, and they're regulated on the total amount of product per unit area. So my guess is they're going to not give a spot treatment rate, but just say you're going to have to practice your application, measure how much you put out, and then back calculate from the broadcast. So we'll just have to wait and see what that final label comes out and says. We can give some advice once it comes out. But my guess is it's not going to be like 0.1% like we did in the past.
Okay. We did have a question if you were able to share the source of the COC values that you used for
Oh,
native prairie
yes.
plants.
So I gathered it from, so there's a paper actually about it that talks a little bit more. I could find the paper itself. I could send that to you and you could possibly send it out.
Sure, be happy to do that. Okay. And then let's see. There was a question, they said maybe they missed this, but did you use any surfactants or adjuvants?
Oh, so I did not talk about them specifically, but they were in the presentation. So we use MSO at 1% volume for volume.
Okay. And I think we kind of answered this already. There was a question about whether or not this is where this is approved for use.
So I believe Dr. Wren had a map where it's approved for use. Is that correct?
Yeah, I took it off. There have been some questions about this. So
Mhm.
SiteVue VM is still registered, but SiteVue VM is the product that you can only buy in bulk, and you have to mix it with another active ingredient. They are currently working on this new label, which is just going to be called SiteVue alone. It's expected to be released in 2025, and that'll have some of the specifics about it. Did that answer the question? I forgot the question when I started
Oh,
talking.
so where the states where it's available for use?
Oh, yeah. And so as they get the SiteVue label, the plan is to label it in all the states that have wild parsnip, is my understanding for sure. So I would expect wide registration once they get that final label approved through EPA, which they've told us is sometime in 2025.
Okay. Yeah, we got a comment that we could use these questions to develop a fact sheet, which is kind of
Yeah.
which is a good suggestion. Yeah, if anyone needs the link to the survey, it is in the chat. There's a question of how you think the efficacy for parsnip compares with using triclopyr.
Triclopyr. So from my understanding, I actually haven't been looking at triclopyr, so I'm not too sure on its composition. I believe it is a little bit more selective. Do you have anything to weigh in on, Dr. Renz?
Yeah,
Triclopyr?
yeah. So we didn't include triclopyr in any of these experiments, and we've included a long time ago. And it's actually, of all the auxinic herbicides, it's actually probably the least effective in our other research and how well it controls parsnip. So this product is much more effective. Probably out of the auxinic herbicides, 2,4-D is one of those that's really, really effective that we've used. The standard that we always compare it to is metsulfuron, which is Escort, and this is effective at very, very low rates like Escort is, even though it's a different mode of action.
Okay, and there was a question, what is the best way to keep up with label publication?
I think that's more of a question for Corteva.
Yeah, I mean,
That might be.
that's a challenge, I think with these new products coming out and trying to keep up to snuff. I think work with Corteva representatives. We in Extension can obviously help give those updates, and we'll try and keep you updated when this information comes out. One of Charlton's jobs before he finished is to write a fact sheet on this, so we'll make sure and include all that information when we do.
Sounds good. Another question about native forbs. So
Yes.
the question says, is it possible that 1 year isn't enough time to see native forb rebound? Are there any plans to continue this study to see longer term efficacy?
Yes, actually, kind of hitting the nail on the head, or head on nail on the head. Yeah, so as we can kind of see, like this might not be enough time to kind of see the average stem density come up. We did have a 1.5 year after treatment, which we didn't show today, and we're kind of seeing a little bit more recovery. So we might see in future years, we might see more recovery, but right now we've only had 1 year after treatment. We can go back to the site and kind of see if forbs have recovered. But for now, we don't know because we only have up to 1 year after treatment.
Okay, and the difference between, can we talk about the difference between SiteVue and TerraVue? They've been using, which they've been using successfully on wild carrot and wild parsnip.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll take that,
yeah.
Charlton.
Mhm.
So great question. TerraVue has two active ingredients. It has fluoroperoxyphen, which what SiteVue has, and it has aminopyrrolide, which is many of you know as milestone mixed together. So those two combinations create actually a very effective general broadleaf herbicide on almost all of our invasive plants in the Midwest. Where SiteVue is just fluoroperoxyphen. It doesn't have any of the aminopyrrolide, has low residual activity in the soil. So they're actually quite different. And so SiteVue is going to be very specific. It's going to work well on some plants like Queen Anne's lace, wild carrot, poison hemlock. Works well on several other species as well. But it's going to have gaps where it's not going to work as well on, say, Canada thistle, crown vetch, and some of our others. So it's going to be much more selective versus TerraVue, which is more of a generalist. That would be my overall estimation.
Okay, we're almost caught up to the questions. Let's see. So there's a question about experience with the Montgomery, Minnesota phenology model for wild parsnip to see how well it matches GDD for your key phenology events in Wisconsin. All right, who wants that one?
So do you remember, Charlton, that you measured the phenology of those plants and then we compared them to the model, that model that Roger's
Oh,
referring to?
yes.
Do you remember how well or hint bad it worked?
Yeah, so kind of when we were looking out and we kind of checked the phonology, it didn't really match up to what we were seeing in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was off by several weeks. It was
Hmm.
underperforming. So at least we only did it 1 year at one location, and it didn't
Hmm.
work well, unfortunately. So we have questions. We'd love to follow that up some more, but we just don't have the resources. So if someone wants to pay us to look at that in the future, we'd love to look at it.
Oh, and we did get a comment. So if anyone wants to check out the chat, there is a resource here that I think one of our Corteva reps dropped in the chat on how to keep up on label updates. So thank you for that, Jody. Let's see. Okay, I think we've just about gotten to everybody's questions. If anyone feels that we did not answer what you needed to know, go ahead. We still have a few minutes. You can drop it in the chat or copy and paste it down there. Um, Otherwise, I'll just kind of open it up to Charlton or Dr. Renz if you want to have if you have any final thoughts you want to leave us with today.
No, I just
No,
want to thank Charlton for doing a great job. He's worked really hard on this project, and so I want to just commend him on being thorough and really ask that you guys all take that survey. It's really going to kind of inform us on how to move forward. As you can see, there's some great
hmm
benefits of this new product, but we're concerned about some of the negative aspects on some of our native forbs, and we're really interested on which native forbs we really need to be careful about. I know there was a comment about some of our native plants in the Apiaceae family that we'd be concerned
hmm
about injury. And so we really want to get your feedback on how you would envision using this resource. Are there certain forbs that you're more concerned about and ones that you don't care about. Like maybe like black-eyed Susan, you're fine if you have 20% injury to black-eyed Susan. So we're trying to get answers to some of those questions, and that will inform some of our future work as we work on this in the future.
Yeah, and I would just kind of echo what Dr. Renz said. Also, just thanking him for giving me the opportunity to do this research in the lab. But at the Renz Weed Science Lab, we like to say that we like to do practical research, not just something, you put in a research paper, but something, that people can actually use. So that's why we did the survey. We want to know how the public would actually use this herbicide and like how we can move forward with it and what we should research.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. And thank you all for being here today. You can go back to MIPIN's website and sign up for another webinar in the future. And please feel free to contact us at mipin@mortonarb.org if you have any suggestions or final questions, and we can relay them to Charlton or to Dr. Renz. All right. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.